I woke up to the sound of construction equipment behind my house. When I walked outside, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. My neighbor had built a massive new bridge across the creek. The biggest problem was where the bridge ended, inside my yard. At first, I thought there had to be some mistake. Then I checked my property markers and pulled out my survey. The bridge didn't stop at the creek's edge. It crossed directly onto my land. My neighbor had apparently never bothered to ask me. A few minutes later, my neighbor walked over like nothing unusual had happened. He proudly told me the bridge had cost nearly $180,000. I stared at him and asked why part of it was sitting on my property. His answer was something I never expected. He said the bridge would make access easier for both of our properties. According to him, that meant I should be happy about the improvement. I reminded him that convenience doesn't automatically give someone permission to build on another person's land. That's when his attitude changed. Instead of answering my question, he handed me a printed invoice. The total construction cost was around $180,000. Then he casually told me that I owed half. I honestly thought he was joking. He pointed at the bottom of the invoice and said, "Your half is $90,000. I looked at the bridge, then looked back at him. I hadn't ordered it, approved it, or asked for it. Yet somehow he expected me to pay for it. I asked him who had authorized construction on my side of the property. He said the contractor had handled all the measurements. That wasn't an answer. So I asked him to show me the document, giving him permission to use my land. My neighbor shrugged and said it was only a creek. He claimed nobody really owned the space around it anyway. I told him that wasn't how property boundaries worked. Then I showed him exactly where my parcel ended. I wasn't going to argue about property lines from memory. I contacted a licensed surveyor and scheduled an official inspection. My neighbor laughed and said I was wasting everyone's time, but I wanted the exact truth documented. The surveyor finished the measurements and showed me the official boundary. The bridge definitely crossed onto my property. My neighbor's $180,000 project wasn't entirely on his land, and now I had the documentation to prove it. I walked down to the creek and finally saw what my neighbor had built. A massive bridge now crossed directly onto my property. It wasn't a small footbridge. It looked like a six-figure construction project, and nobody had asked me for permission. I pulled out my property survey and checked the boundary again. The bridge wasn't close to the line. It crossed well onto my land. My neighbor insisted the creek made the boundary complicated, but the survey showed exactly where my property began. Then my neighbor handed me an invoice for half the construction cost. He said my share came to $90,000. I stared at the number and then looked back at the bridge. I asked him one simple question. Why would I pay for this? He claimed the bridge increased access and property value for everyone. I told him that still didn't make me responsible for his project. I never approved the design, the contractor, or the cost. And I definitely never agreed to a $90,000 bill. To settle the argument, I hired a licensed land surveyor. He carefully measured the creek, the lots, and the bridge foundation. A fresh boundary marker was placed beside the construction. The result left my neighbor completely silent. The survey confirmed that part of the bridge sat on my private property. The construction had crossed the legal boundary. My neighbor finally realized the problem wasn't just the money. He had built the project on land he didn't own. I took the survey, photographs, and invoice to an attorney. We reviewed every document connected to construction. The paperwork showed that I had never authorized a bridge. For the first time, my neighbor's $90,000 demand looked very different. Soon, officials came out to inspect the construction. They compared the approved plans with the actual bridge location. The measurements raised serious questions about where the structure had been placed. My neighbor stopped talking about splitting the bill. The project suddenly became my neighbor's responsibility, not mine. He had to deal with the consequences of building across the boundary. The bridge he thought would solve everything became a massive problem. And I never paid a single dollar of his invoice. In the end, the property line mattered more than my neighbor's expensive plans. He wanted me to pay for a bridge I never requested. Instead, the documents proved exactly where my rights began and ended. Sometimes the most powerful answer is Simply knowing what you legally own